This is the Ferrari 612 or 612 Scaglietti. To be honest, you can call it either, I don't mind. But given that its name comes from a 6-litre V12, 612 is probably more appropriate. It is a V12 naturally aspirated 4-seater Ferrari that many people at the time thought had fallen out of the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. Some even dared to say it was Ferrari's Ford Scorpio. The 612 replaced the 456 GT and was made from 2004 to 2011 when the FF arrived and blew the poor 612 into the weeds. I've never driven a 612, but since that classic Top Gear episode where Jeremy Clarkson raced it to Verbier, I've always wanted to sample the grand touring goodness.
Swiss time is running out.
And today is that day, thanks in no small part to Car Guys fan Jeremy for making it happen. Welcome to Drive Every Ferrari, and this week I'm going to explain what makes this car so unique and enjoyable and why it's one of Ferrari's hidden gems. And we're going to take it for a drive and see if this V12 Grand Tourer can still cut the mustard. Here it is, the 612 Scaglietti, and yes, the eagle-eyed viewers of you will see that behind is an F12 Berlinetta in the same colour. I'm driving both of these cars today, aren't I a lucky boy? Now, I will admit that the 612 is not the sexiest Ferrari I have ever seen, but beneath this slightly ugly exterior is a sophisticated front-engined rear-wheel drive V12 powered continent crossing package that can do 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds and go on to reach as near as makes no difference 200 miles an hour. Ferrari made 3,025 612s, 90% of which were paddle shift, and 300 manuals, of which just 28 were right-hand drive. It cost £200,000 when new. And because of those looks, good 612s are a bit of a performance bargain and can be had for £70,000 to £80,000. That is incredible value, provided it's been cherished and maintained properly. The 612 Scaglietti was named in honour of Sergio Scaglietti, the Modenese maestro of aluminium, who coach-built many early Ferraris. The design split opinions at the time. Actually, it didn't. Everyone was agreed it was hideous. But in truth, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the Scag. Yes, those round rear lights that look like wine gums pushed into a marshmallow are still the car's worst feature. But what you may not know is that it is reputedly based on a 1954 one-off Ferrari 375mm Berlinetta commissioned by film director Roberto Rossellini for his wife Ingrid Bergman. Seen here. This is the one-off 37mm, and there's the 612. The 612 was designed by Ken Ukiyama for Pininfarina, and you can see the resemblance, particularly with the scallop shapes carved out of the sides. It came in 16 possible colours for launch, including 2 new ones, the quite superb Mirabeau Blue and Burgundy. The best colour for the 612 is undoubtedly black, or this blue, because it helps to hide a lot of the quirky shapes. As with many 4-seater Ferraris, if you get one in red, it's a bit too much. The engine is a naturally aspirated 6-litre, which is 5748cc 48-valve V12, as used in the 575 Maranello and not the 599, which means it's belt, not train driven, and that means greater servicing costs. The engine is also sat back in the chassis for better weight distribution, and what's fascinating about this car is that it is made entirely from aluminium. You've got an aluminium space frame chassis which was developed in association with the American specialists Alcoa and which was then used on the 599 GTB. The boot or trunk is accessed with an internal lever or by waving your arms over the tailgate whilst pressing the button on the key. Inside you've got what looks like a relatively small amount of space, but there is another compartment below the main one, and in all you get 240 litres of space. decent enough for a weekend away, but useless for large travel bags, though you could use the backseat space for those. Now, when it comes to the interior of the 612 Scaglietti, luxury is the word that comes to mind. It is beautifully appointed. The leather in here is in pristine condition. It's sumptuous. It's absolutely gorgeous, as befitting an Italian Ferrari of the period. You've got 612 Scaglietti written here over on the left-hand side. The main thing to mention about the interior of this car is, of course, it is a manual, and that means it is exceptionally rare, perhaps one of only 300. So sitting in the driver's seat, it is dominated by the manual stick, the polished chrome, the open gate. You've got a proper handbrake. You've got a lovely slim Ferrari steering wheel with only 4 buttons on it. This, remember, was only when things started to become fully digitized and computerized in Ferrari. Now, of course, it's gone way too far. But I've got quite a high resolution screen on the left-hand side, which has got many different sub-menus to it. You access that by pressing the mode button on the steering wheel, and then just behind the steering wheel you've got a couple of rocker switches on either side of the steering wheel. Both operate the same thing, but you've got rocker switches and then a little dimple to select the menu items. Quite a clever system. Obviously it's been carried through and you can find it even in Ferraris of today. You can also access the sport mode and turn off the traction control from the steering wheel. The stalks inside here, unfortunately, it's old Fiat Group items, so they're not particularly nice. Looks like they've come from a Fiat Uno or a Punto or something. In the front of the dashboard cluster, you've got the rev counter, and to the right, you've got the speedometer. It's actually quite a small dashboard cluster for such a large car. So there's a plaque over here on the right-hand side that celebrates the fact that Ferrari was Formula One world champion. Now, of course, Ferrari has only won the F1 championship once since then, in 2007. Now, to me, it's a bit of a sad plaque because it reminds us just how far into the wilderness Ferrari's Formula One team has been. But hopefully this year, 2022, with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, here's hoping that we can maybe add a 2022 to that plaque. Now, one thing I always forget to do is actually sit in the back of these cars and appreciate it from a passenger's point of view. As you'd expect, it is sumptuously appointed with gorgeous Italian leather. These bucket seats hold you in quite well. I've got some headroom here, not a huge amount, but enough for me. And it feels like a luxury experience, which is exactly what you want from a Ferrari Grand Tourer. You're also in the perfect viewing spot to look at that manual gearbox. Legroom is a little bit snug, but actually because of the way the seats are angled, it's not really a problem. I guess if you're over 6 foot, maybe it would start to be an issue. And since this is Drive Every Ferrari, let's look at the history of Ferrari 4-seaters and where the 612 fits in. 4-seater Ferraris have permeated the range since 1948, and in many ways they are as important to the company as sports cars. Most recognise this 1948's 166 Inter as the first, and therefore the formation of the bloodline culminating in the GTC4 Lusso. In 1960, Ferrari launched the 250 GT 2+2, the first 4-seater made in significant numbers, 957 in total, and featuring a 3-litre V12. Ferrari brought us the 330 GT 2+2 in 1964, a smart if a little plain Pininfarina designed 4-seater powered by a 4-litre Type 209 V12. The first series was the controversial Chinese Eyes 4 headlight design seen here in a beautiful blue colour. The second generation had 2 headlights and was used by Enzo Ferrari himself. It was made up to 1967, where it was replaced by the 365 GT 2+2, which was considerably prettier and swoopier. Next came 1971's 365 GTC4. I mean, just look at it. Sadly though, it only lasted 2 years. It was replaced by the awful-looking wedgy 365 GT4 2+2, followed then by the 400 GT, the 400 Automatic, 400 GTI, and 1985's 412 Gran Turismo. The 412 lasted until 1989. A 4-seater would not return to the Ferrari range until the 456 Gran Turismo in 1992. This magnificent aluminium-bodied 4-seater, inspired by the Daytona and designed by Pininfarina, was powered by a brand new 5.5-litre 65-degree V12 and was good for 442 brake horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of 5.2 seconds. And yes, those are pop-up headlights. After a number of years where the 456 was refreshed and improved, it was time for an entirely new, genuine 4-seater, Enter the 612 Scaglietti. And look here, this is the 612 Sessenta, built to celebrate Ferrari's 60th anniversary. From 2006, the 612 could be optioned with the handling Gran Turismo Sport or Competizione packages, which included uprated shock absorbers, handling, fettling, polished grills, sports exhaust and slightly faster gear changes. The HGTC also got ceramic brakes, but it was also £16,000 compared to £7,500 for the HGTS pack. But it definitely is worth looking for cars fitted with those. But that's enough talking about history and stats. Now it's time to take this thing out for a drive and see exactly what it's like to hustle a 612. So this is it then. This is the first time I have ever driven a 612 Scaglietti. I'm very excited. It's always a car I've been fascinated about, but you can't help but be excited about driving a naturally aspirated V12 Ferrari. It definitely feels like a large car. There feels like an awful lot of bonnet ahead of me. The distance from me to the C-pillar back there seems a hell of a long way. Now I'm helped because I've got two bulbous wheel arches to guide me so I can see where the extremities of the car are. The mirrors are pretty big and decent and the view outside is good as well. In front of me I've got three dials. I've got the speedometer, the rev counter and a big digital multi-function display. I'll put it into first. Let's see what it's like driving a 612 Scaglietti. Oh, steering's very light. That's good. You want that. But it feels like at low speed, like I'm piloting a motor launch. It feels a lot more like a boat than a car. Maybe that's because it's so big, maybe it's because I'm sat a little high, but there's a lot of glass and it feels like quite a strange sensation. It's quite a firm ride, but I am driving a 612 Scaglietti. Now manual 612s are exceptionally rare, so I am fully aware that I'm driving something very rare indeed. When I came to see this car, I fully expected it to be the paddle shift, as pretty much all of them are. So I'm delighted that I'm able to experience one of the last Ferrari manual gearboxes. Remember, it was the 599 that was the last manual gated Ferrari. So headline stats of the 612, 0 to 60, 4.2 seconds. 199 mile an hour top speed. It's a V12 that generates 532 brake horsepower. 532. And you also got 434 foot-pounds of torque. Now, because there's so much visibility here, and because although the nose is long, it doesn't feel that long when you're sat here, coming out of a T-junction like this isn't quite as scary as it is in, say, an F12. So immediate first impressions, the steering is exceptionally light. The car feels very long and narrow, and the gearbox needs a bit of warming up. It starts off, it's quite clunky and agricultural when it's cold and at low speed. It's important not to rush a gearbox like this, just let it flow in naturally, don't try and force it. Now that we're up to speed, it's quite a jiggly ride. Remember, there's no bumpy road setting on this. But what I'm noticing straight away is it is quite a harsh ride. This car's done 38,000 miles. From the outside and inside, it is very well kept. Now, I have noticed immediately that many of the buttons and surfaces in this car are going a bit sticky, and that is very common for Ferraris. Anything from the mid-90s up to the mid-2000s really will suffer from this sticky button syndrome. Doesn't cost a huge amount to repair. It used to, but now there are techniques which are a lot cheaper. But this car would definitely benefit from it because these steering wheel buttons are extremely sticky, and also so is the fascia here for the CDs. We've got an old-fashioned stereo, not a particularly nice looking one, and you've actually got a set of physical CDs in the dashboard that you have to insert. The climate control buttons are quite chunky and clicky. Again, they don't feel really befitting a car of this stature and expense, but they do work relatively well. And even today in Ferraris of this type, you've got very similar vents. Ferrari loves to give you big old vents in the front of the dashboard just to blow cold or hot air right into your face, get you the right temperature. They love it. They kind of look like the ones from an ocean liner. Now, as it's an Italian car, you've obviously got a cigarette lighter and ashtray. You've got a dump bin here for your knickknacks and valuables. And also, if you press the open button down here, it opens the glove box. Again, it says glove box because really all you can fit in there is a pair of gloves. Now, Jason was actually meant to be with me today for the drive of this car, but wouldn't you know it, he's actually on holiday in Italy. So he's in Italy, I'm here driving an Italian masterpiece. So I really wasn't expecting a manual gearbox today, so my mind is calibrated for paddle shift, but now I'm enjoying one of the very few manual examples of this car. Oh, so it's starting to warm up now, just. So we're getting there, and pretty soon we're going to be able to experience all the beans that this engine has to offer. And as you start to go faster, the stiffness starts to make sense. All of a sudden, you've got a super light steering, but it's mated to a chassis which is determined to keep you on the road, and the confidence is extraordinary. I am hustling this enormous car along country roads that really I should not be doing at this kind of speed. And if anything, I feel almost a little bit more confident in here than I do in a modern GT car. It's obviously an older Ferrari, and you can tell that really by the switchgear and some of the components. But in terms of how it drives, it's holding up pretty well. The steering wheel's a good size, it's very light, it's easy to maneuver this car and sweep through some of these bends. I've got a good view out the front. It's a commanding view. It's a captain's view. Oh, there's nothing like being able to heel and toe a manual Ferrari. Now I have to say, Tour de France Blue, which this is the perfect colour for a 612, because it kind of hides some of the more embarrassing parts of the car in terms of the design, and it looks effortlessly classy and elegant. And then you match it with the tan leather that we have here. Bellissimo. It's a great combination. This is a classy car, and I also really like the fact that there's a sort of swathe of aluminium coloured material running through the middle to help break up the difference from the tan leather to the black of the top of the dashboard. And you want the dashboard on your Grand Tourer to be dark, because otherwise everything is reflected in the windscreen. I've learnt that with my McLaren 675 LT. This is a pretty smooth V12 engine, but because it's got none of that Euro restriction nonsense, it's quite growly. There's a lot of noise that comes from it. At times it sounds like a V8, but it's just got a lot more of a gruff demeanour than modern Ferrari V12s. It's a bit snarly, it's a bit angry. Oh. Oh. But boy, has it got a lot of power. Wow. It's still got a lot of shove. It might be an older car, but it's still got it where it counts. Now in the higher gears, when you put your foot down, you don't get that much of a shove, so that shows how really technology has enhanced modern engines. If this was an F12 Berlinetta and you put your foot down at 2,500 RPM, it would rocket forward because 80% of its torque is available. With this, doesn't have that technology, so you kind of just flounder for a bit until the revs gradually increase. The anecdote to that, of course, is that you just drop a couple of gears, like now. Oh, a little downshift there, always nice. Oh, this is a cheeky little number. Oh goodness. And let's check the brakes. Oh yeah, they're not too bad actually. I wouldn't say they're the greatest, but that was just indicating that the number plate bulb has failed, which obviously with older cars you do get these little niggles. I'm not quite sure why you need such a vocal reminder that a bulb has gone, but you know, that's Ferrari for you. This is great. The cornering ability is far greater than you ever think it should be for a car of this size. And the faster you go, the better it feels. Nothing like clacking through the chrome gate of a manual Ferrari. It's one of life's great pleasures. Something you EV millennials just don't understand. This car's got soul, it's got character. You never know what it's going to do. Sometimes it will rip your head off, sometimes it will display a broken number plate light bulb. Who knows? That's part of the fun of it. I mean, I have to say, I do feel a bit privileged because this is a very rare car, and Car Guys viewer, Jeremy, is very kind for letting me drive it. I mean, he has watched the channel, so he does know what it's all about and what we do, but despite that, he's still decided to let us take out this car. But now the car is sufficiently warmed up enough for us to perhaps give you, the Car Guys viewer, and you, Jeremy, at home, a taste of the beans. Sound good? Okay, here we go then. Nice clear roads. Down to second. Oh yeah, still got it. It's still a very, very quick car. That is awesome. But did you hear how refined it was? It just went about its business, wasn't making a fuss, but then you look down at the speedo and you're going very quickly indeed. But it's handling it really well. There's a hint of body roll, but it doesn't lack composure. It rides really well, and then pow, it slingshots out of the bend like a ball bearing out of a catapult. I have to say that the 612 was on my to drive list. I was quite excited to do it even before I came up with Drive Every Ferrari. I think I am a lot more used to the looks now than they were, and I don't think it's anywhere near as ugly as people thought. It's got a bit more of an elegance to it, and when you've heard about the story about how it's based on that Ingrid Bergman one-off special, you kind of look at it in a different way. I know there are angles which are a bit strange, but it's nowhere near as offensive as it was back when it was launched. A benefit of driving it, of course, and for it being such a good drive, is that you don't actually have to look at the outsides, but I think that's a bit cruel because this really is a great Grand Tourer. If you can forgive the looks, and bear in mind though that because of the looks you can pick up this car pretty cheaply, and that's a good thing because there's nothing mechanically wrong with the 612. It just looks a bit odd, but for that you get a car for 100 grand less than it should be. Woohoo! Overall, I enjoyed the 612 far more than I expected, and whilst the smart money would always be on the GTC4 Lusso, the price difference makes the 612 a compelling prospect for those with families and holiday homes in the Alps. And let's face it, the 612 is a far more interesting piece of Ferrari history than the modern equivalent. There were far less of them made, and you can have it in a manual. Thanks for watching this episode of The Car Guys on Drive Every Ferrari, the 612 Scaglietti. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting and useful. If you like what we're doing on The Car Guys, please subscribe, leave comments and likes. There'll be another episode next week.